Yo, Childe's my favourite character in the game. He was my first limited 5-star, and he's the one I've had the most fun with. Let's get straight into 5 C0 teams for him, starting with his strongest one. Not only is it the strongest team for Childe, it's one of the strongest in the game with any characters. It's got 2 of the best buffers, the best off-field damage dealer, and a strong DPS with fast Hydro application to drive Xiangling's numbers even higher. The idea is you apply Hydro first by using Childe's skill, apply Pyro with Bennett's burst, and because both elements now coexist on the enemy, you can swirl both for Hydro and Pyro, and reduce the enemy's resistance to both with the Viridescent Hunt set. It's a fun team, and because you're not using Childe's melee stance for too long, you don't need to worry about the cooldown when you switch back into him, even at C0. It's useful in single target and AoE, the Pyro Resonance gives extra attack, and you have a lot of options for weapons. For Xiangling, you could go for a 4-piece Emblem build with the catch so you have a burst up more often, or you could go for a 4-piece Crimson's Witch with the Dragon's Bane so she has more damage. Kazuha can use Iron Sting to buff the team more, or he could use Favonia's Sword to give Xiangling energy. Bennett can use anything with either a high base attack or energy recharge as a secondary stat, and for Childe, you can use Rust or anything with crit. I won't say anything else about his team because you probably already know how strong it is, but if you didn't know already, take my word for it, it's genuinely one of the best teams in the game for damage, and it's fun. The second team we're going to look at is Mono Hydro. It isn't quite as popular, but it still clears content quickly, and I find it satisfying to see all the Hydro numbers. There's a lot of damage because we have 3 characters dealing damage at the same time, and we have Mona buffing that damage with a burst as well as holding the Thrilling Tales for Childe. The Hydro Resonance will give the team more HP, which increases survivability as well as increasing Xingqiu's healing and Yolan's damage. If you want a bit more comfort though, you can swap Mona out for Barbara or Kokomi. Energy isn't a problem because you have so many Hydro particles, so instead of using a Sack Sword on Xingqiu, you can use something to give him more damage. I still like to run Yolan with 4-piece Emblem and a Favonia's Warbow, so that'll give even more particles. With Childe attacking so fast, he's going to trigger Yolan and Xingqiu's burst quickly for even more damage. Mona's a flex character in this team, and I put her here to keep it purely Hydro, but if you don't have her or you don't want to run her, you can use Kazuha, Sucrose or Venti, or you could throw in a different element with someone like Rosaria, Fischl or Beidou. If you were considering running Electro though, I'd recommend this team. The original version of this team was called Fireworks with Childe, Fischl, Beidou and Bennett, but now there are a bunch of different options. Fischl gives a lot of energy, so you definitely want to be using her, but for the 3rd slot, either of Beidou, Yolan, Xingqiu or Lisa will work. For the 4th slot, if you're using Bennett on the other side of the Abyss, you could use Cookie with 4-piece Tenacity, or Jean with 4-piece Viridescent Venera. Just like the last team, Childe's fast attacks are going to trigger more damage from Yolan, Beidou or Xingqiu, as well as Fischl if you have a C6. The only thing I'd bear in mind with this team though is that, with Beidou or Lisa's burst lasting 15 seconds as opposed to Yolan or Xingqiu's 12 seconds, you often end up using Childe's melee stance for longer. When you switch out to set everyone else's skills and burst back up and then switch back into Childe, you often end up having to wait for his skills cooldown to finish so you can activate his melee stance again. The way around this is to activate your longer duration burst first, like Beidou and Lisa's, then use Fischl afterwards so you're not using Childe's melee stance for as long. A lot of players always consider this with all their teams anyway, but if you don't, it's definitely worth keeping this in mind for this team to avoid waiting for that skill cooldown. His C1 reduces the skill cooldown, but honestly, it's not as valuable as using your Primo Gens for other characters, so if you're free to play, just save them. Learning to manage his skill cooldown will be the most complicated part of his kit, but you'll get it with practice, and it'll save you money or Primo Gems. Before we move on to the next team, I just want to show Childe off with a Viridescent Hunt from the Battle Pass. As of right now, it's the only weapon in the game with crowd control, and in my opinion with Childe, it's the most fun character and weapon combo we have. Look at how fun it is. I think they should make some 5-star weapons with passives like this, because prior to getting 5-star weapons for Childe and doing more damage, this was the most fun I had in the game. There are plenty of weapons to put on him to deal more damage in the Abyss, but when it comes to the overworld, nothing tops this. This is an old school one. Back in the earlier days of Genshin, before players became so obsessed with optimizing damage and stat shagging, we used to run this. It's for players that value simplicity and low maintenance. When it comes to the overworld, I like teams that don't require bursts. I've found characters like Cyno and Xiangling to be frustrating because, strong as they are, you need their bursts to deal most of your damage. With this team, you can clear everything with skills and normals only, and if you did want to use Albedo or Zhongli's bursts, they only cost 40 energy, so you'll get them back quickly. The Geo Resonance increases damage, Zhongli's shield and burst petrification makes it comfy, and with Albedo, Fischl and Childe dealing damage at the same time, it tears through everything. Since Albedo's first run in 1.2, this team's got even stronger. We have a 4-piece tenacity now for Zhongli, Albedo has a signature sword and a better artifact set with the opulent dreams, and the Geo Resonance got buffed in 1.3. While it won't deal as much damage as the first team, it's still more than enough to 9-star floor 12. It's good at single target and AoE, so it can beat almost everything the Abyss throws at you. For the last team, I thought I'd do one with Layla because she's on Childe's 3.2 banner. Because she doesn't come out for a few days, I'm using Diona, but Layla will give a shield and off-field cryo application. We're using Kazuha, but if you don't have him, you can use Yolan or Xingqiu, and we're running Rosaria for the crit rate from a passive, as well as the crit rate from a cryo resonance. If you do go with Xingqiu or Yolan, the Hydro Resonance is going to give extra HP too, which is what Layla's shield scales off. I'm not a big fan of Childe in freeze teams, but they're viable against opponents that can be frozen. Just bear in mind this team's going to be weak against opponents that can't be frozen in comparison to the previous teams I've shown. I'd recommend not staying on Childe long in this one, instead quick swapping more than the other teams with Rosaria and Kazuha both having short cooldowns on their skills. That way you won't find yourself waiting for Childe's skill cooldown either. Burst Ganyu or Kaya can work in place of Rosaria if you want. They won't give you the crit that she gives you, but you'll still get some from the cryo resonance. Overall, I don't think this team deals as much damage as the others, but I find it fun and it's different because you're using Childe for less time and you're using the other characters' skills more. As far as the score out of 10 goes, I feel 8.5 is a fair one for Childe. He's strong, has a lot of weapon options, flexible with his teams, and has fast Hydro application. The only thing keeping his score from being higher is that the cooldown on his skill can often dictate how long your rotations need to be. With a lot of his teams, it doesn't take long to set up with the other characters, so by the time you switch back into Childe, you sometimes have to wait for his skill to come back. Definitely don't let this dissuade you from pulling him if you want him. He's still by far my favourite character in the game. He was my first limited character and he's the only DPS I haven't got bored of since starting the game. Just know he'll require you to consider cooldowns more than you might need to with other teams. I honestly found that made me a better Genshin player though, and the consideration of cooldowns is something I do with all my teams now. I've got a video coming out with 5 C0 teams for Layla, so if you're interested in seeing that, subscribe and take it easy.